Right, so we are going to get started here. I'm just going to make sure I'm sharing the correct screen. There we go. So we're very happy to be here. I'm Jen Goldson. Some of you may have seen me before at other forums that we've held as part of this process. We're excited to be here again. We have the steering committee here and Mayor Driscoll, and we are about to get started with just some introductions. But first, I just want to say thank you for your responses to the first question here. What housing programs or initiatives do you hope may be considered? It's always good to know where your head's at as you enter these meetings. Okay, so Andrew, are you here to introduce the interpreters?
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew. I'm a planning assistant with James Goldson. And yeah, thanks again for everyone for coming today, this evening. We have Spanish interpreters, Elena and Miguel, who are here. And so there's a globe that you can see at the bottom of your screen. And what we need everyone to do now is to go to the globe and select your language, even if you are an English speaker and you want to hear the webinar in English or in Spanish. You can choose either one, but you need to choose a language to make sure that you can hear what everyone is saying in the correct language. So you can see where the globe is. It should be on the bottom of your Zoom window underneath the slide. And please just go in there and select a language now. And we'll go on from there.
All right, great. So hopefully that worked okay. I had to stop the share for a second because the globe was not showing up, but I should be in the English channel now. So if for any reason, interpreters or Andrew, if it's not working properly, just let us know.
And if anyone's having trouble with sound or anything, you can just let us know in the chat and I'll write a message in there about it as well.
Great. Okay, so now we're going to hear from Mayor Driscoll.
Yes, sorry, Jen, we were also going to see if Miguel could come into the English channel for a moment. And
oh, I apologize. Mayor Driscoll,
okay.
Give us just a second. Want to get this interpretation right.
If you have a moment, Miguel, to come in the English channel and explain how to select the globe in Spanish. Yes.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Now you're up, Mayor Driscoll. Ms. Mayor Driscoll.
Thanks, everyone. Can you see me okay, Jen? All right, perfect. Just want to say how grateful I am to Jen and her team and to our planning staff as well. It's been just an amazing opportunity to meld together both updated demographics, information from our census, from our community, really trying to best understand how we can strategize to address the community housing needs in Salem. We know as a community we're growing. We know that we have immense housing challenges, and the only way we're really going to overcome that is by working together. I'm heartened by the responses we've had to date on this housing roadmap, and today's a really important opportunity for us to better understand how the information we've collected and the strategies that might be possible to help us achieve what I think is a really aligned goal, and that's making sure that Salem maintains the character that we have, a place where everybody feels welcome and at home and can access safe and affordable housing. That's no easy feat for any community, particularly communities in Greater Boston who are seeing tremendous growth. But if anybody can do it, any community can do it, I want to believe it's ours. By coming together with opportunities like tonight and the others we've had and the ones we'll have in the future, we hope to put together strategies that we can implement and lead to a place where people who love Salem can live here. People who work in Salem can live here. People who want to grow old in Salem can do so. The only way that's going to happen is if we come together and build consensus for these strategies. So thanks for being here this evening, for the work that we've already done, but most importantly, for the work that we have yet to do. It's going to take all of us to really tackle this challenge. And I'm grateful for your time and interest in doing so. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. All right, Cassie.
Good evening, everybody. I'm so excited for y'all to be here. I'm also really excited that we're going to get to talk about some of the strategies that Jen and her team have been working on over the past several months after we've heard so much from everybody in the community. And so we're really looking forward to your input on these strategies that we're going to start proposing, so that way we can create a plan that hopefully works for everybody in the community. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. All right. And now let's hear from the steering committee. So I will actually just call your name so that it's a little more streamlined here. Carol? All right. I'm going to keep going. I can't actually see everyone to see who's here. I'm going to do Kathy and then Patty after that. All right, Patty.
Hi, I just want to say hello to everyone and thanks for being at this forum. And I also want to add that we're really pleased that the City Council is united in prioritizing housing creation as a group, and that's important for the city at this point.
Thank you so much. All right, Carrie Murphy and then Pat Small.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Murphy. I'm the Health and Wellness Coordinator in the Health Department. I just want to thank you all for coming. And I mainly work around food access and food security, but housing plays such a big part in people's ability to afford things like food that I just think this is such an important group. So thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, so Pat Small, and then we're going to do Felipe.
Hi, I'm Pat Small, and I am a member of the Council on Aging. So, of course, my primary focus is for the elder housing. However, I was absolutely thrilled to see the announcement of the new coming out of support for people who have questions about the legalities of, for tenants and landlords both. I was absolutely thrilled to see that that's happening already. So that came out of this too, I think. So thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, Felipe, and then we're going to go to Amanda. Oh, just unmute. I think you're still muted.
Of course I was. Sorry about that. Felipe Zamberlini, I am a member of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board. So of course, when I look at this plan, I'm looking at the question of affordability and stability for Salem residents and others who want to live in Salem. And I do see some really familiar names in the attendee list. So welcome back, and some folks that I haven't seen before in these meetings. So welcome to this conversation, and looking forward to hearing what folks have to say.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, we have Amanda and then Patricia Zato.
Hi, this is Amanda Chincola. I'm the Deputy Director with the City of Salem Planning Department, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you all have to say about the strategies we're going to present tonight.
Thanks, Amanda. Patricia, and then I'm going to Ty Hapworth.
I'm Patricia Zato, and I am the co-chair of Salem for All Ages. And it's an age-friendly initiative to make sure that Salem appreciates and looks at people of all ages, particularly older adults. And I'm delighted to be on this committee because I see that everybody seems to be committed to the needs of senior citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Okay, we're going to go to Ty, and then after that, we're going to go to Barbara Cleary.
Hi, everyone. Ty Hapworth, Counselor at Large. I just want to thank everybody on the steering committee for the work they've put in here, and then to everyone who's attending tonight, because this is one of the #1 things that we hear about on the council.
Thank you. Okay, Barbara, and then we're going to go to Sarah Moore after that.
Hi, this is Barbara Cleary. I've been professionally involved in the financing of several thousand units of housing, almost all affordable. I'm particularly interested in the wide variety of strategies which are going to be presented and looking forward to the input of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Sarah Moore, and then we're going to go to Lori Stewart, and I think that concludes the intros after that.
Hi there, I'm Sarah Moore. I am an associate professor of sociology at Salem State University and a member of the Salem Board of Health. I specialize in studying health disparities and health equity, especially in urban communities, and housing is a huge part of that. So I'm really grateful to be part of this team.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Okay, and last up is Lori Stewart.
Hi, my name is Lori Stewart. I'm with the League of Women Voters Salem, where I chair a group on affordable housing. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to what everyone has to say for strategies. As a former public housing resident for 15 years, I truly understand the need for affordable housing. But it's one thing to say you're for affordable housing. It's another thing to make it happen. And I think that's where the strategies come into play. So thank you all for coming.
Great, thank you so much. All right. So today we're gonna, I know Andrew, I said you'd do this, but I'm gonna just do this slide and then I'm gonna shift it back over to you. Tonight we're really going to do three primary things. We're gonna share a draft vision and draft goals for your reaction and input. Then we're also gonna share some ideas for housing programs and initiatives. And really, the third and most important thing is we want to understand what you think of what we're sharing. We're about to write the draft plan for the first time. And so before we do that, we want you to really weigh in on what we're thinking at this point, based on what we've heard from the community and based on the needs assessment, coming up with some ideas for you to look at tonight. So we're excited to share them. But first, Andrew's going to talk a bit about how you can participate tonight.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, so there's going to be some various means of participation tonight. We're going to have some polls and some open questions that you can respond to. And those are going to show up on the screen so everyone can see our responses. And I'll be sharing in the chat a link, which you can also see here, pollev.com/GenG. And when we get to the polling, I'll be putting that in the chat and we'll have a reminder about how to make that work, but it's pretty straightforward. You go to that address, and then the question that we're going to be asking will come up, and as we switch through the questions, it'll automatically update. So we're going to always be monitoring the chat. I'll be here looking at the chat and the Q&A. So if you want to chat to us, you can use the chat box or the Q&A, where we'll be able to answer individual questions. That's a little easier to keep track of. So if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A. And then at the end of the meeting, we're going to have an open comment time where we can unmute people who wish to speak and ask questions. So there's various ways to participate today. And in addition, I just wanted to put this slide up so that we can make sure that people don't get confused, because when you move over to do the polling and click on that link that I'm going to put in the chat shortly when we get to it, it'll open your browser. And if you're in Zoom and it automatically takes you to your browser, it can be a little bit confusing. So we're just going to make sure to stop sharing the Zoom presentation when we're done with the polling activities, so that you can switch back to the Zoom window, and so that everyone's on the same page, just in case there's any confusion about moving between Zoom and the polling. And here's another way that you can also participate, just to make it a little easier. If you wish to use your phone, you can scan this QR code, which will take you to the polling site. Or if you just want to participate by text, you can text 22333 and type in Gen G, and then that'll connect you to the polling activity. And then you can type your response into subsequent text. So those are all different ways to access the same thing, but I'll keep you posted in the chat as well as we go through, and let us know if you have any questions or are having trouble getting connected in the chat.
Andrew's really an ace at monitoring that chat. So if you're feeling confused by anything, send a message in the chat and Andrew will be right there for you. The other thing, just as a backup, you can also just, if these methods don't work for you, that's totally fine. You can also, you can do two other backups. You can either just email Andrew, and his email, he can also put that in the chat, but it's andrew@jmgoldson.com. And That jmgoldson.com is right here at the bottom of the slide, so you can see how to spell it. It's just andrew@jmgoldson.com. So you can email him your answers if this isn't working for you for any reason. And you can also always put your answers in the chat as long as we can match it up to the question later. These won't show on the screen if you use the email or the chat, but we'll have a record of it. You should also know that all of the things you write tonight, whether it's through this polling software or if it's in the chat or the Q&A, and anything you say tonight is all part of the public record. And so we will have a full transcript of everything that's written. And, people should know even private messages between people are part of the public record. Okay, great. So let's dive right into getting to know you. The hardest thing about leading a Zoom webinar is not being able to see you all. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. And some of you are already doing this, which is fantastic. And so we just like to see, are you a resident, employed in Salem, a business owner, maybe you represent a local or regional service provider or organization, maybe you serve as a city official, and you may do multiple things. And so you can actually pick more than one choice, because we get that you could be a resident and employed in Salem, and certainly a resident and a city official. Okay, so I'm watching the numbers change here, and hopefully you can also see that. Andrew, if people can't see it, let me know. I know that sometimes that's an issue, but I think we have the setting correct. So it looks like we're having 44% Salem residents. And of course, it's probably higher than that because we're allowing you to do multiple choice. Employed in Salem, about 11 or 14%. It keeps changing here. We have a number of city officials on the call on the webinar, 22, 21%. And then we do have some local and regional organization service providers, around 22, 23% or so. And it looks like maybe one, or I'm not sure how many business owners. It says 2%. All right, excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward here to the next one. All right, the next one is your age. So if you can just choose your age category. And this is helpful to us. I know we collect this every time we do an engagement event with you. Some of you who've been here at these other webinars have answered these exact same questions, but it actually helps us understand when we get your answers to what you think of the strategies, it lets us understand a little bit about you and who's showing up to these meetings. All right, so it looks like the numbers are slowing down. We have a 28% in the 35 to 44 range and 28% in the 55 to 64 range. So the numbers are changing a little bit, but we actually have quite a number of under 44-year-olds, including 18 to 34-year-olds. And then in the 65 to 74 range, we have looks like about 19% or so. All right, great. Thank you for doing that. Okay, if you are a Salem resident, so if you're not, don't answer this question. But if you do live in Salem currently, are you renting your home, owning your home, living with family or friends, unhoused or other? And I'm seeing the numbers moving around. It looks like most people answering right now are owning your home, 84%, about 11% renting your home, 5% living with family or friends. All right, thank you. Okay, last question for this portion. How would you describe your racial or ethnic identity? And you may select all that apply. We also have a prefer not to answer or other not listed choice as choice G at the bottom. All right, so I'm watching the numbers move around a little bit, but it looks like they've slowed. So we have 74% identify as white, 13% identify as Black African American, 9% Hispanic, Latino, Spanish, and 4% Asian. Great, thank you for doing that. It's also good for us to understand a little bit about you because we can compare to what we hear in different engagement tools. So what we heard in the survey might be a little different than what we hear in other tools. So sometimes it helps us that way as well. So thank you. All right, so we have heard from many community members. Many of you, I suspect, have been involved in one or more of these. And so we had the community forum, the first one in November. We had a forum focused on senior housing in January. We had a series of focus groups and interviews between August and September. And then we also had a survey that was launched in October, and we kept it up live. We took it down in, I believe it was the second week in February. We also had people, we call it meeting in a box, but what does that mean? It's something we made up. It's basically a little meeting kit that steering committee members and other members of the community held their own small meetings to try to reach other populations that maybe don't come out to community forums on Zoom or take the survey. And so we had that as another mechanism to reach more people. And then we've had a series of steering committee meetings, as well as an anti-displacement workshop that we held with the Affordable Housing Trust last month, sometime in February. And so now I said the total participation points here because these are not people, because some of you have participated, maybe many of you, in multiple of these tools. But we have, 537 participation points that we can count. All right, so what are, just have a couple slides of what we heard, some of the general themes that we heard through all those different mechanisms of engagement, and then we're going to get right into what is the draft vision, what are the draft goals, and what do you think about it? So what are community members most concerned about? Loss of the community's diversity, culture, historic resources, and charm. The severity of the affordable housing crisis, displacement of longtime residents and housing insecurity, and then mixed feelings about new development and potential impacts or externalities. People want to see sensitive design and in locations that are appropriate. Renters also have a lot of challenges with affordable housing in particular. And in terms of just looking, we're not going to share a lot of data with you this time, but just so you know, many of you may already know this, but many Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC residents do rent their homes. So there's a disparate impact. What are communities members most concerned about? So we heard a lot about the condo conversion trend, taking apartments, converting them to condominiums. You've had an impact on your rental housing stock, both in terms of condo conversions, but also just in terms of rental cost increases. And then also short-term rentals taking up housing stock that could be year-round. Residents, many of the residents in the point facing housing discrimination, concerns about overcrowding due to high rents, and older adults having difficulty downsizing, finding accessible housing, and also paying rising property taxes. So I'm really just kind of touching the surface here. We do have a whole engagement summary that goes through all of the details. We have both detailed summary of every engagement mechanism that we used, including transcriptions of all the comments people wrote in, all the Post-it notes on Miro boards and whatnot from focus groups, the survey summary. And then we have, as part of that more detailed, we also have an aggregated summary of what does it mean, taken all together, what did we hear? And so that can be made available if people are interested in reading that summary document and the details that are part of it. All right, so let's get right into this. This is what we really want to share with you tonight because we really want your feedback. So we have, the first thing I'm going to share is a draft vision statement and draft goals. And then after we get some feedback on that, what we're going to share are a few of the draft strategy ideas that fit within those goals. And I'm going to describe that more when we get to it. But just so you know, this is the first of two parts of the sharing. We're going to share, and then we're going to hear from you about the first piece we're sharing, the vision and the goals. Then we're going to share again about strategy ideas, and then we're going to want to hear from you again. Okay, so where did these come from? They're based both on the updated housing needs analysis that our team put together over the first few months, and that we continue to revise. Then we also base these on things we heard from the community in these various tools that we heard from people, both concerns and hopes. And what we try to do to customize the work that we provide for communities is to really use the words that we hear people say to us, use the phrases, use the words, and try to be as true to what we're hearing as possible. And so with that as my opener, we're going to go over the draft vision first. Now, just so you know, I'm going to go over the draft vision and the goals. There are, let's see, 6, 7, 8 goals we'll go over. And then I'm going to flash you a slide with a summary of all of that, just so you can remember it a little bit. And I believe Andrew's also going to post some of this in the chat so that when it's time to answer the questions about what do you think about this, what would you change, you don't have to jog through your memory from 4 slides ago. But here's your first look at it. So draft vision, and this is multi-part. I just have one part on the screen right now. So, you know, these words really matter. So I just want to, I'm going to read this word for word. And I just want you to think about the words that we're choosing here and how much you agree or maybe don't agree with what words we chose. So we have the Salem community sees housing as a human right and a fundamental aspect of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We envision that our city will be an equitable place where people of all backgrounds, means, and ages are welcome. People who work here, longtime residents, and newcomers can live here and thrive. We celebrate our diverse stories and histories. We protect the availability of affordable, secure, and stable homes. And that's it. Okay, couldn't remember if there was one more. So let me leave that up for just a second. You can read it. And I underlined some key phrases just to help with the way that I read it. So think about, what do you like about this? Maybe there are things you don't like, and then maybe something's missing that you were hoping to see in there. So anything goes here. We're not looking for a rubber stamp. All right, now let's get into the goals. So there are 3 categories of goals. This is the first category. The first category is overarching goals, and there are 3 of those. The second category is about location goals. And the third category is about sustainability and design goals. So this is the first category. There are 3 overarching goals in this draft. Preservation and stability we put first. Preserve existing homes and protect vulnerable residents from substandard homes, discrimination, and displacement. That's goal number 1 under overarching goals. Goal number 2, households in need, protect and create affordable homes to support the housing needs of Salem's most vulnerable residents. And then the third overarching goal is about supply. Sensitively expand the supply of homes of various sizes and types. Ensure that redevelopment minimizes displacement of existing low and moderate income residents. So it's kind of a double-sided coin about supply. It's both do it sensitively, expand the supply, but sensitively, and think about where you're doing this. Let's avoid displacement or at least minimize displacement. All right, so these are the 3 overarching goals: preservation and stability, households in need, and supply. Now I'm going to move on to location goals. So there are 2 location goals in the draft. One is about complete neighborhoods. Focus on areas with access to jobs, transportation, shops, and services. Ensure strategies to minimize displacement of existing residents. So you can see we heard a lot about displacement, and we really tried to weave that in to many aspects of these goals, not just in one place. Second location goal is about transformative areas. And we have a map we're going to show you in a little bit that explains this when we get into strategies. But let me just read you the paraphrasing version of the goals here. Consider opportunities for redevelopment of non-residential areas. Ensure access, example, safe walking, public transit to employment centers, schools, shops, and services from these transformative areas. And so some of the areas we're talking about, and you'll see on a map later, are areas along Highland Ave, as an example. Salem, the South Campus of Salem State College is another example. Okay, third goal under location, we're calling middle housing, sensitive and well-designed new homes in existing neighborhoods. Maintain historic characteristics. So this is really about, can we do middle housing. I don't know if people are familiar with that term, but it basically means not the huge, not huge, massive developments of hundreds of units, but maybe something, it could be very small single families. It could be 2-family or maybe 3-family homes. And so looking at that middle type of housing, and can these be placed in neighborhoods that are in areas that are, sensitive to the historic characteristics of the neighborhood, but also designed to be sensitive as well in terms of the aesthetics, the placement, the massing, et cetera. So those are 3 location goals. One is about complete neighborhoods. The second is about transformative areas. And the third is about middle housing. Okay. And then the last category of goals is sustainability and design goals, and there are 2 of them. The first is, the subheading is sustainability and resilience. More sustainable and resilient housing stock, innovative design, sustainably sourced materials, renewable energy sources, flood resilient construction. And I know you're already talking a lot about this, just in general, green building and thinking a lot about sustainability and resilience. And so we really wanted to integrate that into thinking about this housing plan as well. And then the second piece around sustainability and design goals is focusing on the rehabilitation of your building stock. And we already saw some of the comments in the chat when you first came in were about, let's rehab some of these existing units. Someone mentioned existing senior housing units as an example. Rehabilitation of existing buildings, including preservation of historic buildings, improve energy efficiency and safety of these existing buildings in order to preserve the historic characteristics of neighborhoods and of the buildings, improving quality of life for residents. Okay, so now these are all the goals. So now what I'm going to do is just give you the recap here. So I didn't put all the words on here, but the vision is complete. The way that I read it on the first slide there. And then the goals, I just put the headings so that you can remember. We had those 3 categories, and we had preservation and stability, households in need, and one about supply. Then we have the location goals, complete neighborhoods, transformative areas, middle housing. And then we have the sustainability and design goals, which we just went over. And so our first question is just going to be, how do you feel about these? Do you feel very positive? And Andrew, if you could, if you haven't already, put the vision statement in the chat so people can see it when they're answering this question. So it's just an open, very general question. In general, how do you feel about these draft vision and goals? Okay, so the choices are a scale here. The highest being very positively, second highest somewhat positively, third is somewhat negatively, and the fourth is very negatively. Okay, so we're seeing the numbers move around right now. And so far, it looks like somewhat positively is the highest choice that I see right now. So I'll be very interested to hear on the next slide, we're going to have you explain what you like and what you think should be changed. And so you can explain more about, for those of you who are saying very positively, we'd love to hear, well, why are you saying that? For those of you saying somewhat positively, well, what made it so it wasn't very positively? What could we do differently to make it a very positively for you? And then for the very negatively, we'd love to hear what would move it up in the ranks for you here from that lowest score. All right, great. So it looks like things are slowing down. So I'm going to get into this open-ended question now. And this is just, you can write whatever you'd like here. We gave you an open-ended question. You can write a short phrase, you can write a sentence, and you can answer multiple times. So if you want to put in a phrase and then put in another phrase, that's fine. Just make sure I understand, are you talking about something you like or something that you think should change? And that will be very helpful for us as we go through these results. So there's always a little bit of a delay here because what's happening behind the scenes is Andrew is actually getting your answers on a different computer than I'm on, and he's moderating just so that we don't get, sometimes you get Zoom bombed these days, and we want to try to avoid that if we can. But once these start popping up here, I'm going to just start to read them out. And if, again, for any reason this isn't working for you, you can always use the chat. or email in your answer. But really, what do you like about those goals and the vision? And then what do you think should change? And Andrew, can you just chime in? Are you seeing people answering? And there's just a delay on my end. Here we go. Never mind. I'm getting them now. All right. So I feel positive about the goals stated, but recent housing projects have been in direct opposition to these goals. Will we see these things happen now that if you adopt this plan, will you still see things that are in opposition to these goals? All the goals are good. Knowing the details makes them better. Yeah, and I haven't actually gone over the details yet. When we get into strategies, we will do that. More focus on housing stability and anti-displacement. So even more focus than we did. Does not address the unsustainability of building housing in floodplains. Right, in environmentally sensitive areas, including floodplains. Yeah, and you didn't get the benefit of the full text that we wrote, mostly because it's a lot to read and a lot to put on a slide, but we do talk about environmental sensitive areas and we talk about flood areas. So, when you look at the draft, you can let us know if you think the full version gets it better for you. Okay. Let's see, the vision is excellent as is. Many in Salem are opposed to any change. I went with very positively, but I do have concerns about achieving all the things. Yeah, and how realistic is that? Change more, so a suggestion for change, more opportunity for single people, no kids. So housing choices that would support people who are in Salem, single with no kids. I find the vision statement mostly positive, but it should emphasize prevent people being forced to move from Salem due to economic forces. Okay. I like the equitable emphasize. I like celebrating the diversity, and I like the preservation. The issue is we are always talking about mindfully displacing residents. The discussion should be about including our low income residents within this plan. Yes, it's a good point. I didn't go over the demographics of who participated. And I'm sure, as you know, it's challenging to get a truly representative participation. But I have to give a lot of kudos to your city staff and your steering committee. They went out, as well as other members on the Housing Trust in particular, went out into the community and tried to get much broader and diverse representation. And so we had some success with that. I'm sure one could argue it could have been, maybe there was more we could do, but I think that we did give a good effort, and it certainly helped to hear the various perspectives that came out of that additional engagement process that the steering committee, the Housing Trust, and the city staff did. All right, let's see. Would like to see it explicitly stated that modern energy savings can be used in historic homes as long as overall appearance is the same. Okay, that's fair, I think. Does not acknowledge local preference, meaning not displacing our existing community. Like the goals focus on preserving housing and not displacing folks. Like to see numbers within the goals. Okay, so some metrics. We currently have only 799 affordable housing units. We have 5 to 7 more people waiting. We need housing for many, many more people. And I don't know if it got cut off. It actually looks like it is the end, but it ends with I would. So there might be a second one after that. The Bricks project was not affordable of the 6 units. How can people afford those prices? Yeah, and we did hear that a lot as well. We like that you want the city to be diverse like it always has been for the last 100 years. We like that keeping the character of the city is at the top of the list. Great. The sensitive approach and wording often results in less production. There's no hard goal or mention of, sorry, I have to keep pushing it up, affordable housing, subsidized permanent. Yeah, we do actually mention, we don't talk about a specific number, you're right, but in the kind of the longer version of those goals that I paraphrased, we do talk about affordable housing, permanent and subsidized. I like them, but have concerns about implementation. Okay, well, we'll get into strategies in a minute and meeting these goals. We've missed opportunities specific in the sale and repurposing of publicly owned properties. How will we meet these goals? Which is really the next part of the presentation. I like that the vision statement affirms that housing is a human right. The only thing missing from the vision for me is the connection between housing and health. Does not address traffic. We are only 8 square miles and are already gridlocked, right? So getting people out of their cars and designing the city in a way that you're not reliant on cars. I've said very positively, but I'm mindful of the devil being in the details. Yes. The overall goals are good. I'm concerned that the criteria for neighborhoods focuses on transportation, jobs, and stores. I'd like to see how additional housing can be incorporated on a site-by-site basis throughout the city, which would minimize conflicts between historic Salem and modernized Salem. Finally, I believe that the private sector will never be able to address the need for affordable housing in Salem. Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about what the city's role is in subsidies and that kind of thing. Something to see the number of units planned. Okay, fair enough. A number of people have talked about that. And what percentage of the total housing units in Salem need housing for poor workers, homeless and middle-class workers, blue-collar workers? Also, I'd add a goal to imagine a life cycle for Salem residents. Don't break up existing communities to favor those moving up from Boston. Yeah, we've heard a lot about newcomers in particular. Where are the class considerations? Human rights and protecting the vulnerable is important, but housing accessible to your workforce is also a major component of supporting the commercial sector in Salem. 2, overarching goals. 2 and 3 heavily overlap. They are both about housing creation at their core. We already know about the push to create more housing. We need to think creatively and not just feed the existing ideas. 3, overwhelmingly white and homeowner renters are half the residents in the city, and they're not at this meeting. That's true. We did get more representation through the survey and the meeting in the box and other methods where we went out to the community. So, but you're right, at these Zoom meetings, we don't get as diverse representation as the other mechanisms that we used. They should have focused forum just like seniors with targeted outreach. Yeah, we have actually found that going to where people are and having smaller groups is a pretty effective way of reaching a broader diversity of people. We also had committee members and town staff go out in the community with a short survey, and we got a lot more diverse participation that way as well. I like the preservation, the sustainability, and the equity. Many residents are engaged and want to improve developments, and this is often described as don't like change. Yeah, that's true. Maybe there's some unfairness there. You want to see development, but you want it to be well designed in good locations, etc. It looks great, but sounds all for long term, while many are in need now. Hierarchy of need: food, shelter. Mazel tov to you. Thank you. Some solutions now. Okay, so similar. Looking at shorter term. Location goals: we don't need to focus on neighborhoods with access to jobs, transport, and shops. We need to expand access to more neighborhoods. So the transformative goal spoke to you more than the first goal. I worry about the transformative areas turning into removing a lot of vital green space for more houses while green spaces. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're going to show you a map, and we're actually not talking about green space. We're talking about non-residential uses, essentially, and looking at, are there ways to either convert uses or do infill on, areas that are, parking or other, areas that are maybe not underused for the existing use, but not green spaces. That's a good point, and we didn't make that clear when we went over it. Finding housing now, so similar. Okay, this is great. Thank you for your participation in that. And so let's go into the strategies now. So we want to talk a little bit about the framework for strategies. We like to take a multi-pronged approach here, and I'm going to talk about what that means. But there's really not one way to tackle the complexity of your housing crisis. So we don't only focus on displacement, we don't only focus on production, and we don't only focus on funding. We really try to focus on all 3 of those things. So we have this framework that we're using. We were inspired, if anybody knows of his writing or perhaps is interested in reading it, a fellow by the name of Shane Phillips wrote a book many books. He also does a blog and lots of articles and whatnot, but he wrote something called The Affordable City, which, and I just want to give him credit for this because he talks about the 3 S's, and then we've actually added a C in our list here. And I'll talk to you about what those are. So the 3 S's. First, strategies about stability, and this is really anti-displacement and preservation of what some people call naturally occurring affordable housing, which basically means existing homes that are not high-end luxury homes that are still affordable, many of which are still rental units. So stability, recognizing the dignity of housing, it's more than an investment vehicle. Protect renters and naturally occurring affordable housing. And I'm going to talk about more of these and give you some examples of strategies that you could do for each one. But let's first do the 3 C's plus the 1 C. The 3 S's. Now, if you're confused, I know why, because I'm misspeaking. The 3 S's plus 1 C. So second S, supply. Rents and home prices rise as a result of scarcity. And so we want to address both stability and supply, building enough homes to meet all needs. The third S, subsidy. Somebody said private market shouldn't be doing this all on their own. Ensure everyone benefits from having a home in a stable community, supporting those who need additional assistance. And so we're going to talk about subsidy. And then the last one, we added this category, the C, capacity. The city needs local implementation capacity. And we'll talk more about this, but for now you can think people, system, structure, and that is, maybe we should have put this first, but it's really what is needed to tackle any of the other 3 categories of strategies. All right, so now we're going to take them one by one. So stability. So we had a bunch of ideas for strategies around stability. Here are a few that we particularly wanted your feedback on. So the condo conversion ordinance, I think many of you may know that the city's already working on this and looking for special legislation from the state legislature to allow it to happen. But what it would do is it would require hearings on condo conversions before they happen in a permit process so that there's transparency and review. Would also require relocation costs for people who are displaced so that they can find someplace else to live. And also give the tenant or the city the right to actually purchase that condo instead of putting it out on the open market. So those are just some of the key features of the idea to do the condo conversion ordinance. And again, the city's already been working on this really hard. So that is one way to approach stability. Another way we have here, there are a series of anti-displacement tools. Now, these would also require the state legislature to approve, but things like displacement compensation. If a landlord, let's say, there are, what's a good example? A good example is if a landlord wanted to raise the rents dramatically and force somebody out, or if the property owner sold the building and it was going to be torn down, or no fault eviction is another example. So you can, and it's similar to what the provision that you're already talking about in your condo conversion with relocation costs, but it's called displacement compensation. So it's providing funds if you are displaced. I think you'd rather not be displaced, but there's also right to return ordinance that would also require state legislature approval, but it would be essentially if your building is demolished and rebuilt and there's a new building put in its place, you as a tenant who was there, perhaps you're a lower or moderate income tenant that was displaced, you would have the right to return to an affordable unit in the new building. And of course, there's lots of questions about that. Would DHCD approve that? There's certain local preference requirements that are allowed. So there's a lot to look at there, but that's another idea that communities across the country have done. And then there's also, other anti-displacement tools like protecting from egregious rent increases called anti-gouging. things like that. So those are kind of a toolkit for anti-displacement to think about. Now, none of those things that I just mentioned in anti-displacement, the city could do right now. So some of you are saying, but we need help now. We don't want to think long-term. Those are things that the state would need to first approve, just like the condo conversion ordinance. Preservation of homes, preserving homes. So I talked about that term, naturally occurring affordable housing, before. So really doing two things: adopting policies that discourage redevelopment. So looking at your regulations and your policies around where development's happening. How is your zoning either encourage, perhaps your zoning is actually encouraging redevelopment of some of those naturally occurring affordable homes, and then an acquisition initiative, which I think has been discussed. Looking at funding, of course, you need a funding source for that, but looking at funding nonprofits, for example, to acquire those naturally occurring affordable homes. And to some extent, you've been doing this, the North Shore CDC has been doing this to some extent, but it really does rely on having the funds. But the idea would be to acquire as many of these naturally occurring homes as possible. So these are just some ideas. I didn't get into a lot of the details here, but I just wanted to give you kind of the gist of these ideas for stability and anti-displacement. All right. And I'm happy to go back and answer any questions, but the next one is about supply. And so this is the map I talked about before. One of the ideas here is to rezone transitional areas. So you can see we're highlighting the Highland Ave area, Jefferson Ave area, South Campus of Salem State College, Shetland Park, which I know you're already working on a master planning process to try to envision the future of that area. But looking at these areas and really looking carefully at the zoning and what you want to try to promote there for perhaps mixed use or multifamily housing. The other two ideas here, you may have, some of you may be familiar with inclusionary zoning and some of you may not be. So let me explain what that is. So inclusionary zoning means that, you don't have this ordinance right now. What you have is a policy that the planning board does essentially require that 10%, I believe it's 10% of the units in a new development would need to be affordable at the very low income range. So 60% of the area median income. And that's without an ordinance. That's just the current policy right now. And so the idea of having an ordinance would strengthen that policy. It would actually codify it into a city ordinance. And so there wouldn't be a change necessarily in the policy itself, but it would be codified as an ordinance. And so that's one idea for looking at supply of truly affordable housing. We heard a lot from community members that the type of affordable housing that has been built at that higher level, that 80% of the area median income, is just not affordable to Salem residents who are in need. And the data that we talked about before bears that out. So that's an idea. And then the third idea I'll talk about, but it's the second one on the slide here, is a community land trust. So the idea here is that probably a nonprofit, maybe funded with city funds, for example, would buy property, and it could be property that has buildings already on it, homes already on. So it could be some of those naturally occurring affordable units, or perhaps it's an infill site or another site where new homes could be built. But the idea of a land trust is that that nonprofit, that land trust, would continue to own the land, and it would sell the houses themselves to low income homeowners. And the homeowners own the house, but not the land. And so it makes the purchase of that house more affordable because you're taking the land value out of the equation. It also creates a very long and secure affordability where there's a cap. You can sell your home and you can build some equity, but you also ensure long-term affordability because that land trust still owns the land. And, it just is a very secure way of creating housing. It's also an expensive way of creating housing. But there are communities in Vermont and neighborhoods in Boston and other places around the country that have had success with this model. So that's an idea. There are maybe some other supply ideas too, but those are some of the few that we thought would be worth getting some more feedback on, in particular, what you think of those transitional areas, the land trust idea, and I'm happy to explain more, and then having an ordinance around inclusionary zoning. And just so you know, one thing about inclusionary zoning ordinances, it can also help with local subsidies, because in some ordinances, they write up that if the developer can basically choose to pay the city, the Affordable Housing Trust, to build for them to build units or fund affordable units rather than them building it. So it's just an option. You don't have to put that in, but that's one mechanism to create a local subsidy, which is shown here. So the third S, local subsidies ensure everyone benefits from having a home in a stable community and supporting those who need additional assistance. And so there's a few different basically funding mechanisms or incentives that we listed here. There are some other ideas that we've also kind of toyed with, but these are some of the ones that we felt like it would be really good to get some feedback on. So the first is a real estate transfer fee, which is not enabled yet by the state legislature, but it is actively being considered. And what it would be is a community, if the legislature creates this enabling legislation, it would allow communities to vote voluntarily to adopt a real estate transfer fee in their community. There's nothing that would force a community to do that. Totally voluntary. But if you did adopt it, it would place a small fee of up to 2% on high-end real estate. So some communities are looking at sales of over $2 million, for example. And it's also highly customized. You could, for example, exempt owner occupants. So it would be only on, non-owner occupants sales of property. And it's really just a way to essentially create more revenue to support housing in your community. And so this is something that could support, for example, a community land trust or other programs. It could support, I'm going to talk in a minute about capacity as well, but it could support other programs to help anti-displacement initiatives and things like that. So that's one local subsidy idea. Next one is how to use the ARPA funds. And so the American Rescue Plan Act, which I think many of you probably know is COVID relief, essentially, funds. And so municipalities are able to get some of those funds. And I believe Salem either has been or is being allocated $35 million. And so you can do many things with it. But one of the things you can do is under the public health and negative economic impact category of what's eligible for ARPA funds. And so there was a final rule that was issued pretty recently that towns can use these ARPA funds for capital expenditures under this category. And a specific example is that recipients may build certain affordable housing. And so you can use ARPA funds to help build housing. And then the last one is tax incentives. And I just have a kind of a bucket category here, but there's some specific programs in particular that can help promote affordable housing in particular. There's something for those of you who may know this already. It's called tax increment financing. And it's essentially a state tax exemption program that you can exempt the incremental improvement in the value of the property, so that it incentivizes a developer to create something that they may end up spending more, property taxes on, because it decreases that incrementally decreases the tax burden, and in return it incentivizes them to create more affordable housing. And happy to explain a little bit more about that. I know I'm being very vague about it, but essentially it's tax incentives to try to build the housing so it's under local subsidy, because it essentially means that you're collecting less tax revenue on those properties. So instead of providing funds to a affordable housing developer, you're making it less expensive to create that improvement. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. So those are the main ones we wanted your feedback on for the 3 S's, and then the C, the capacity one. So the big idea here is creating, and this has been talked about, creating a city housing stability office. And that we see that as really critical. There are many communities that do have this. And really what it is an office focused on helping residents find and maintain safe, stable, and affordable housing. And so this is actually one of the anti-displacement strategies, but I put it into capacity because it really is expanding the city's capacity to promote anti-displacement by assisting residents so that residents know their rights, so that residents can find affordable housing and know how to access affordable housing. And then it also is tied to these other 2 ideas on this slide. One idea is to create a rental registry. Some of you may have heard that. A number of other communities have done a rental registry really across the country, but including in Massachusetts. And what it is it basically means that property owners who rent out property, you rent out any units, would need to register with the city to say, this is my name, this is my contact information, these are the terms that I'm renting it out as for. And it also creates a list of property owners who are landlords, and it creates a list of tenants. You can have it be 2-sided where you also have tenants so that you have a way to contact people and help explain for landlords, help explain their responsibilities, and for tenants, helping them help explain their rights. It's a way to just create more transparency and accountability that the city would oversee to help prevent illegal evictions. It can help renters stay safe and stable in their homes. And you can also tie it to other anti-displacement strategies. I talked briefly about anti-gouging strategies to prevent, a 50% rent hike in a year or some egregious rent hike, or other, anti-displacement strategies. It's a way to really be able to enforce those. And the rental registry can count or can collect data on lots of different things, including, as I said before, the terms of the lease. And you can require that if they do raise the rents, they need to notify the city. All right. The other thing here that the City Housing Stability Office can help with is technical assistance. So helping people understand through holding legal clinics, holding tenant rights workshops, housing search workshops, things like that are examples. And I forgot I did this in this. This is graphic here is an article by the same fellow I talked about before, Shane Phillips, just talking about rental registries more. So happy to share the link if anybody's interested. But if you Google this title, you'll find it. So you can find more information. So those are the ideas we wanted to share with you. And I'd be happy to go back if anything I said. I mean, Andrew, are you watching the chat and the Q&A? I want to make sure that I explain things well enough. I know I didn't go into a ton of detail, but I want to explain things well enough that people feel like they can have an opinion about some of these things. Because I'll show you the next slide is I won't show it to you yet because I'll make the poll live, but it's basically, how do you generally feel about those strategy ideas? And then we're going to ask you, explain your feelings about those ideas. And then we're going to ask you, what other ideas do you have? So you'll get a lot of chance to weigh in on these. But I just want to know if it even made sense what I was talking about.
Yeah, there's some things coming in the chat, a few questions and some comments. We go through them, or do you want to do the polls first?
Well, just if there's if people seem confused by anything, or if there are questions of clarification, and Miguel, or who, I'm not sure who's interpreting right now, if there are any questions on that end as well, I just want to make sure people understand before we get into what do you think of them.
Well, there's a question about if the city assessor's office has a list of rental units. There's questions about the land trust, if the land trust homeowner pays rent to the land trust, which I answered no. There's some questions about, what it would be like as from the landlord's perspective to register. If they, would have to pay more tax or other things that may come out of being registered on that list.
Yeah.
There was a question about in lieu payments for which Cassie answered. So there's some discussion going on in the
Let's
chat.
answer that rental one because I have a quick answer for that. So would it cost more? Yeah, most cities charge a fee each year for the landlord to update the registry. We do. I'm a landlord in Boston, and we have a rental registry, and it's pretty easy. We pay a small fee. I forget exactly how much. I think it's less than $20 a year, and that's all it really costs. I mean, the city would determine, what the fee would be, but the ones that I've heard about in other cities as well have been, pretty small, like $16 or something. But it's basically like you have to go online and fill out your new information. It doesn't take long. So I would say from personal experience, it's not a big burden. Okay, so it sounds like you guys are handling some of those other questions behind the scenes there. So maybe we can move right into this. All right, so I know I didn't go into a lot of detail. So I understand this is hard, but if you do have any feelings about these strategy ideas in general, and we thought, let's not go one by one. It's, very tedious. So just in general, feeling very positive, somewhat negative, or very negative. Okay, so what I'm seeing so far, I'm seeing a lot of somewhat positive. And then the others are smaller, but I'm seeing some very positive, 13, 12%, the number's changing, and somewhat negative, 6%, 5%, but most are saying somewhat positively. Okay, great. So now let's hear why you answered that way. So why didn't more of you say extremely positive? That's what I really want to know. And then for the ones that did say extremely positive, what do you particularly like about them? So we're going to go ahead and get your open-ended answers again. And, you can break up a longer comment into a number of shorter comments if you'd like, and that will come up a little faster. We did not limit how many times you can answer. So if you want to put a few short things in, that is something that you can do.
Jen, I was going to say, while we wait for people to respond, there were a couple sort of general comments that came in during the presentation that kind of fit in this category. One person said there's a big difference between homeowner occupied rentals and other types of rentals. Another person asked how we can hold developers accountable to make sure affordable units are properly processed. Just generally how to incentivize developers to create affordable housing. And there was another, someone mentioned that they think it's a good idea to add a transfer fee for high-end real estate. Many people own a lot of rental housing. If they sell, they can share some of the profits. So those are a few things that came in while people are typing away here.
That's great. You getting some? Here's one. Okay. I think it's a good idea to add a transfer fee for high-end real estate. Many people own a lot of rental. Oh, this is similar to what you just read. If they sell,
I think it's the same one's coming through there now. Yeah.
Somewhat positive because there are answers that haven't come up yet. Okay, great. As a landlord of an affordable apartment where I live, I am skeptical of registering. Would my taxes go up if I raise the rent? Would I have to pick from the list? Okay, so lots of questions about the rental registry. I'm somewhat unsure if these strategies can be implemented and how successful they will be. Yeah, and some are harder than others because some require state legislation and others don't, but certainly they will cost money. Developers are not super incentivized to create more affordable housing. Yeah, right. So maybe you're talking about the tax incentive idea. Although the devil is always in the details, yes, good point. These strategies are in the right direction. We can modify and specify how we administer these overarching policies and strategies as needed for Salem, but overall excellent strategies that move us in directions better than the status quo. Great, good to hear. I felt like it was missing the ability to help current residents become homeowners. Oh, interesting. Yep. Yeah, you're probably right. It is missing that. Okay. Good strategies, but I wonder if it is enough. And as someone else noted, what real incentive is there to draw developers here to include truly affordable units? Yeah. I'm cautiously optimistic. Good. I would like to see more explicit support for naturally occurring affordable units in the strategies. For example, tax breaks for small landlords providing below market rentals. Yeah. Yeah. And we did talk about that. We have like a very long list of ideas, and that is actually one of them. And we just decided that we couldn't talk about all the ideas here tonight, just for the sake of time and how much people can really absorb in this kind of thing. But thank you for mentioning that one. That is in the list. Somewhat positive, though close to extremely, as believe most of the tactics excellent. However, there was a goal for sustainability and resiliency, but no set of strategies to address the carbon-intensive transportation and housing. That's true. We didn't talk about that at all in these strategies. And we do have some on our longer list. I'll have to look back because I can't remember them off the top of my head. Andrew, if you remember them, you can kind of mention them verbally. But I think we do have some in there that talk about, sustainability and resilient design. We see a plan or well-thought plan based in part of info given by community. That's great, but we need the short-term plan to help those in need. Yeah. I work for a housing and homelessness prevention nonprofit working in Malden, Chelsea, Revere, Everett, and some of these strategies are ones we've seen used successfully, including the Office of Housing Stability and Anti-Displacement Services and Technical Assistance. I can tell that these strategies are well researched and proven. Thank you so much. That's nice to hear. Thank you. Incentivize developers to adopt affordable housing. I responded relatively negatively for the following reason. The condo conversion ordinance will not change the supply, which is the crux of the issue regarding affordability. In fact, the prospect of the ordinance will encourage accelerated conversion in order to be grandfathered from the provisions of the ordinance. The access of ARPA funds offer a great opportunity to finance some programs. If seized upon quickly, they expire December 2026. It's a good menu of options, but how does it append to the opinion that has been collected so far? Which options align? How does it align with the city's current approaches and strategies? Okay. I'm interested in limited equity ownership in addition to community land trusts. Okay. It's not realistic to think developers can be truated to do the right thing. The developer's goal is to make a profit, and they need to. I would prioritize supply for the most needy populations, including special needs and the disabled. One thing lacking is some immediate term, a number of you have said this, like assistance for those currently living in substandard housing or a risk of displacement within a year or less. Somewhat positive, I like the idea of a rental registry, like the idea of a tax on sale of high-end real estate, wary of establishing more administrative positions rather than building housing, wary that tax collector will just go into contractor pockets for very few housing units. Agreed with the tax breaks for small landlords keeping their rents low. Yeah, and that was something someone mentioned before. Developers need oversight to make sure they do the right thing. Sorry, somebody tell me what SRA is. I'm not thinking of it right now.
Excuse me, that's the Salem Redevelopment Authority.
Oh, of course, right. Salem Redevelopment Authority needs to be more transparent. Yes, support the Office of Housing. I am a Salem newcomer and a homeowner who bought and moved from the Boston area, not realizing that we were actively gentrifying a neighborhood where those renting at fair market rate were still being displaced to build our condos. I appreciate the condo conversion ordinance strategy to disincentivize or prevent further gentrification. Yeah, and it's really not about individual choices here or feeling shame in any way. These are structural things that are going on. They're much bigger than individuals. Okay, great. Well, thank you. These are really helpful. let's move on here because I really want to hear other strategies. Now, some of you started to say that, like the tax incentives for small, landlords to rent at affordable rates was one idea that you put in there, because you guys don't know what's on our longer list just because of our choice about trying to focus on some key ones to get your. But it doesn't matter because we'd love to hear your thoughts, and if they're already on our list, that's great. If they're not, we'd love to consider what else you'd like to see on the list, especially some of you talked about, a lot of you talked about short-term strategies. And so, and some of you, mentioned some general ideas, but if you have any other specific ideas about short-term strategies or anything else you think is kind of missing from what we talked about, that would be helpful. Are you getting?
Someone's mentioned in the Q&A, where is the involvement and inclusion of public housing among these strategies? So I think that would definitely fall in this category.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and we do talk about, the Housing Authority and their plan, some of their plans that they're already working on, but we didn't mention it here. Big zoning changes, yeah. I'd love it if you could clarify that more. Whoever wrote big zoning changes, just give me a follow-up message with big zoning changes. For example, give me something you're thinking of. Loosen the rules for creation of accessory dwelling units, which you recently adopted, but loosening those rules. Okay. And we actually, we do talk about that a bit in the other long list. Okay. Are we getting some more in here, Andrew, that you're approving? Here we go. Have single people who are renters serve on the Affordable Housing Trust. Important voice, more needed. Remove most of the elected officials. The trust shouldn't be political. Okay. So this is looking at, what voices are being heard on, the housing trust in particular, and how are these entities making decisions representative or not representative of different voices. Okay. It seems like we're not getting a lot of these. Is that right, Andrew? Or are you still back there approving things?
Oh, here's another.
How to help renters move to homeownership. Yeah, and that was something someone mentioned before. I don't think we did address that in the longer list either. Public housing, which has been reduced nationally by over 20,000 due to the Faircloth Amendment. But the Salem Housing Authority already has some scattered site public housing. They need to do much more and need to address the national conversation to repeal. And infuse funds into public housing, which would be affordable, even for Salem residents. Okay, thank you for clarifying this one. Big zoning changes to support middle housing, for one, as an example. Okay, yeah, thank you. So the middle housing goal that we talked about before. Great. All right, I think I'm going to move on, Andrew, unless you tell me there's more that I haven't seen. Here's one. Direct supports to current players, subsidies for current owners to upgrade property, capture the value directly, and shortcut flipper incentives, expanded subsidies for first-time home buyers, direct subsidies for renters who also work in Salem, tax increment financing for long-term owner-occupied properties at risk of displacement. So tax incentives, basically. Okay. More money for first-time home buyers. Salem only provides a max of $7,500. Current zoning laws don't allow even old Salem to be built, right? That's true. All right, great. So I am going to move on here, and we can also take your raised hands at the end here, but I just want to close the formal portion by saying that even though this is the last community forum that we have as part of the project. You can see on this slide the 3 forums that we did, and then of course there were other engagement that we already talked about. But there are more opportunities to share your ideas. This is not the last time. So you can first of all send us an email at any time, and I think Cassie is the email that it goes to. So maybe Cassie, you can put in the chat what the correct email is for people to send, any thoughts they have throughout the process. or questions they have. Then our next step is to create the draft plan. And so we'll be working on that with the steering committee over the next few months to put the draft plan together. And then the hope is to be able to release that in June for public comment. And we would love for you all to review the draft plan and give your comments. We also are planning to schedule a presentation to the planning board and the city council sometime in June as well. We want to try to get that in before the summer so that, hopefully more people can attend and give public comments as well. About the ideas in the draft plan. And then once we have public comments as well as comments from the planning board and the city council, we'll go through a round of revisions to the draft plan and then resubmit for planning board and city council approval sometime over the summer, depending on how long they want for their own comments. And then it would be approved by the planning board and the city council. Probably sometime over the summer is what we're hoping. So that is the schedule. And I'm going to take the share down, but really this is just time for your open public comments. If you want to raise your hand, we can unmute you. We'd love for you to ask any other questions you have, and we'll do our best to answer if we can. Or even if you just want to share your ideas or what you thought about the strategies or the goals or the vision, whatever you'd like to say. We're happy to unmute you to do that. And also, Miguel, if there are any Spanish speakers who have questions, you can help us with those as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take the share down, and we can look for your raised hands. And also, Andrew, maybe we should start with any questions in the Q&A that have not been answered yet.
Yeah, there's one that came in a minute ago. Does Salem have an idea how many undocumented residents there are and their needs?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if Amanda or anyone else knows offhand. Yeah, I don't think so. Is there another one?
The other stuff in the Q&A, someone asked what the percentage of minority homeowners is, and I was trying to sort of open some things to find that out, but I have too many windows open at the moment. We can get that information to you.
You're multitasking. Okay. Yeah. Well, we can, I think we actually, do we have that breakdown in our more detailed report?
It's somewhere, somewhere. Yeah.
We can get that. We can post that information somewhere, or maybe collect their name and answer them later if they want to share their email address. All right, great. So I am looking for hands, and I do see one. I see Marcia Finkelstein. So I'm going to go ahead and let you unmute, Marcia. So you should be enabled to unmute.
I actually did have a question. I think I must have pressed a button by accident.
Oh, okay. No worries. Didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. Okay.
No, it's.
Oh, sorry. I thought you was done. I unmuted you by accident. Or I muted you again. Okay. I don't actually see any other hands. Does anybody else on the call wish to speak? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. So I think what we'll do is, we've kept you here for almost an hour and a half now. We've gotten a ton of feedback from you. We'll go through these answers that you gave us through the open-ended questions and the polling, and we'll also look really carefully at what you put into the chat. And what we always do is create a very detailed summary of what we heard tonight. And so that will be added to the aggregated engagement results for this. And then as we are creating the plan over the next few months with the steering committee, we will have your input tonight to look back at, as well as all the other input that we did get. Cassie, do you want to say just a few closing words to wrap up? I think that's everything that I have.
Sure. Just thank you everybody for coming. We really appreciate your feedback and the comments that you gave us, and we look forward to incorporating these into the draft plan that we'll get up on the website sooner rather than later for your review.
All right. Thank you, and have a good night, everybody.